go.
So there you go. Thank you, Carl. I'm going to hand over to you.
You know what? A little bit piece of trivia. You know why Zoom had to put that in, that whole thing of recording? Because people were secretly recording their bosses. So they're going in for meetings and secretly using Zoom to record their bosses. So that's why they had to put that in. It got a bit nasty. So there you go. There you go. There we are. GDPR compliant. There you go. Hello, everybody. My name is Karl C. Pupé. This is live TV. So I'm going to share this part is always the most dangerous part for me, which is sharing my screen. I always feel like something will go wrong, but it's pretty much there we go. Can everybody see my slides? Awesome. Beautiful. So let's take it from the start. Let's take it right from the beginning. I'm going to shrink myself down. I know I'm very handsome, but it's a bit distracting how handsome I am. Anyway, let's go. We're going to have a lot of fun today. So welcome guys to the Youth Music webinar. It's all about teaching Generation Z. In the words of that great philosopher, Sean Jay-Z Carter, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. Unless you're double jabbed. If you're not double jabbed, you couldn't be anywhere in the world, but that's a whole other situation. I'm only messing around. And also I say Generation Z, not Z. We don't say JZ, do we? We say JZ. So some people might take umbrage, but I'm going to use the American pronunciation. So welcome to this seminar. I've got a bit of a cold, but don't worry, I'm here. I've got my Lemsip and I'm ready to go. So let's talk about it. What are you going to be learning about today? What did you come and you gave up your lunch hour for? Hopefully good things. So in this webinar, you're going to learn what a generation is and how your age affects the way you interact with the world. So I don't know about you, if you've got, Christmas is soon approaching and you've got that annoying uncle, your nan, your mum and your dad, maybe your kids or your nephews, they're annoying. Now I'm going to give you science to show you why they're so annoying, all right? You're going to understand how the brain works. And we're going to talk about generations. So that's number one. Number two, I'm going to close my window. Sorry, 2 seconds. But there's noise. Okay, that was the fake number two. This is the real number two. Number two, the Strauss-House generational model. This framework, so this is what you're going to be learning about. This framework explains the key characteristics of every living generation and why this is significant in our turbulent times. Really interesting theory. Number three, you're going to learn the generational profile of Generation Z. That's the current people, young people that we're teaching, and we're going to look at their values, their preferences, and communication styles, and how they manifest in your classroom, in your workshops, in your spaces, and hopefully give you the edge on how to deal with them. And number four, you're going to learn strategies and techniques to appeal to your Gen Zers, or Zers, whatever, that will maximize your engagement and minimize poor behavior in your classrooms. That's what we're about. I hope that sounds good to you. Lovely jubbly. But before we begin, don't forget, let's have some fun. I like Jim Carrey, especially during lockdown one. I know it seems like a distant memory, but that was hard. That was hardcore, man. Jim Carrey kept me alive. So guys, what I will ask for today is really going to be an interactive session. I've planned a couple of activities. If you don't want to be on the camera, you don't want to talk, that's fine. I don't mind you talking at these particular times to me. But please participate in the comments. Let's have some fun. I don't know about you. I've been on some Zoom meetings where the guy sounded like a walking encyclopedia. He's just saying really large words and it was just so boring and it was so tedious. I don't want to be that way. I come with a lot of energy. So guys, let's learn something and have some fun together, all right? So it's going to be more fun than the Squid Games. I don't know if any of you have watched the Squid Games. Go and watch Squid Games. It's great. Watch it. All right, a bit about me. So who's this handsome Duke of Hastings Bridgerton man in front of you? Well, my name is Karl C. Pupé, and I've been in education for around a decade. I think it's about 11 years now. Anyway, something like that. So some of my roles have included a trained teaching assistant providing one-to-one support for children with severe special educational needs, SEN, and social, emotional, and mental health needs, SEMH. You could tell I ripped this straight from my CV. That's what it's all about. So what does that mean? I was a mentor, I was a youth worker, and I used to go into schools and, helped kids that show challenging behaviors with special educational needs. We know that, and social, emotional, mental health needs, which is emotional dysregulation. I'll talk a bit about that anyway. So that's what I used to do. Then I became a fully qualified teacher. Yay. Then one of my proudest moments of my career was that I became a NEETS coordinator, specializing in teaching vulnerable 15 to 19-year-old students, mitigating antisocial behavior and bleak life outcomes. In English, please, Carl, what does that mean? So a NEET, first of all, let's break it down. A NEET is a young person who's not in employment, education, or training. These young people tend to be kicked out of mainstream schooling and get placed in something called alternative provision, or otherwise known as alternative provision, covers things like PRUs, which are pupil referral units, centers, and what we had to do was try and provide some form of education or employment for them, because statistics showed that if we did not, a NEET was 80% more likely to get involved in antisocial behavior. We're talking gangs, we're talking drugs, we're talking trafficking, we're talking country lines, we're talking being perpetrators of or victims of violent crime. So I did that for a little while. One of my colleagues is in the audience, so we did that for a little while. Worked in a place, worked in Tower Hamlets and worked in the Isle of Dogs, which is one of the most socio-economically deprived places in the country. So I did that for a little while, thoroughly enjoyed that. I moved on to helping to run an inner city London schools behaviour department, which was always interesting. It's kind of like Dangerous Minds, showing my age now. In the chat, actually, does anybody know what I'm talking about? When I say Dangerous Minds, I just want to check the age. I've done some trainings where people don't know what Dangerous Minds is. So let me just check. Put that in there if you know what I'm talking about. Film with Michelle Pfeiffer. If not, then I'm all by myself there. Let's take a look, sorry. Yep. You are all as old as me. Anyway, so I'm messing around with you. But yeah, it was kind of like Dangerous Minds without Coolio. Next, I did teaching supply in inner city London successfully. Trust me, these kids are vicious. It is like the Squid Games with these kids. I've seen teachers getting assaulted, verbally abused. It's horrible. And I did it. I came out unscathed. Okay. I earned a Institute of Leadership and Management Level 4 certificate in leadership and management, exactly what it says on the tin. And in 2019, my proudest moment so far, apart from having my child and getting married, was writing my first book. So I wrote a book called The Action Hero Teacher Classroom Management Made Simple. Oh, I love this animation. It flies in there. It's an award-winning book as well. Learning Ladders and Twinkle awarded it one of the best books, top 40 books to read or something like that. I just accept the award. So it's an award-winning book, and I run a blog at, you guessed it, Action Hero Teacher. Somebody's coming in naughty. actionheroteacher.com, which is an award-winning blog as well. And recently, I was awarded a fellowship in the Royal Society of Arts, Commerce and Manufacture. So I'm a fellow. So I'm FRSA. So, I've got a title now. So I'm very, very thankful for all the opportunities. So hopefully I'll get to share all the knowledge I've learned with you. And one more thing, this is an exclusive. I'm currently working on my new book called The Action Hero Teacher 2. And you guys are getting exclusive access to some of the materials that I'll be using. So in the new text, which is hopefully next year, we're looking 2022, possibly early 2023. But you are getting a sneak peek. So I'm excited and I hope you are too so far. So first things first, let's get down to the veg and potatoes, not veg, meat and potatoes of this. What the heck is a generation? So I'm sure you've heard some of these terms: boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, as the next generation is called. But what does it all mean? So the Cambridge Dictionary defines a generation as all the people of about the same age within a society. A new generation occurs every 12 to 20 years. If you teach learners born between 1997 and 2012, so if they're between the ages of 8 and 25 years of age, you'll be teaching Generation Z, which I think the majority of you as music practitioners, music practitioners will be teaching these young people. So activity 1, this is the first one. We're doing a test on your musical tastes. If you fail this, we're kicking you out of the session. No, I'm only joking. So activity 1. So what I want you to do for us in the comments section, or if you're brave enough, you can even say it. You can unmute yourself and say it. I want you to tell me who your favorite music, tell me your favorite music album from your favorite band. And most importantly, I want you to tell me how old you were when you first heard them. Your favorite music album from your favorite band or individual or artist. And most importantly, how old were you when you first heard them? So I'll give you mine. So my favorite artist at the time was Biggie Smalls. I'm sure you guys are familiar. And his album was called Ready to Die. And I believe the age I was around 12 years old. I don't know how I snuck it past my parents, but I used to play that every night. So I was 12 years old. It was Biggie Smalls, Ready to Die. So let's see what people are coming with. All right, Crazy Sexy Cool. Hey, I see you, Tiffany. That was a good album. Wizard. Okay, 14. Any more? Any more for any more? I'll leave you for a second to do that. So think about your favorite music album, because there's a reason, there's a method to my madness. Okay, so let's keep on going. So, oh, there's one more. I'm Big Thief, 24. Hmm. Take that. Never forget. No, I'm not laughing at that. My sister loved Take That as well. I just have image of them. Was it Take That was dancing in? Anyway, I won't expose my sister on this. This is being recorded. But yes, Take That. She had lots of posters. All right. So hold that thought for a second. So this is going to be important in just a minute. Now, why does that matter? We are all shaped by the generations that we emerge from. Our beliefs, language, ideas, and worldviews are molded in the times that we inhabit, and your worldview determines how we. So our worldview determines how we interact with reality. What does that all mean? So there was a guy called what's his face now? There's a guy called William James, and he said this, and this was in 1819. He's seen as one of the pioneers of modern psychology, and he said this: in most of us, by the age of 30, the character has set like plaster and will never soften again. Okay. This was in 1890, over 100, well, almost 140 years ago. And neuroscience, and this was before we could look at the brain, and neuroscience has backed up his claim. So this is your brain as it ages. It's really important to understand the biology of the brain. So from the time that you are born until about your mid-20s, your brain's neural networks is incredibly elastic and fluid. When you're younger, your brain's flexibility makes it easier to be more creative, learn and absorb new information quicker, and be willing to adapt to new ideas and worldviews. In fact, when we look at our brain is really three parts. And again, this is down to evolution. You've got your reptilian brain, which is at the base of your skull, which controls all your involuntary functions. You've got something called the amygdala, which is more what we call your primal functions. Your functions like lust, food, hunger, revenge, very what we call the emotional brain. And then right in the front of your the brain, or in front of this part of your skull, you've got a flap of tissue called the neocortex, or the new brain. And this is your rational brain. It's your thinking brain. And this part of your brain takes the longest time to mature. Okay, so after 25 years of age, our neural networks tend to get to set, and we become stuck in our ways. All right. So Dr. Tara Swart, a neuroscientist and leadership expert, states our brains are inherently lazy and they'll always choose the most energy efficient path. Okay. So it's really important to understand when we start reaching that threshold, as I said, when the neocortex starts to mature, what we start to do is, instead of being as creative, we tend to lean more on experience. That's where we get the phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Okay. So it becomes harder. I'm not saying it's impossible to be creative, but if you look at young people, I've got my daughter, we're teaching her, well, she's learning one language at home, she's learning another language, and this is apart from English as well. She's learning one language, my native language, at home. She's learning, obviously, English at school, and she's learning Cantonese because her daycare teaches Cantonese, and she's talking in all three languages where I can't even barely say hello in Cantonese. So it's amazing what they can absorb, and that's just the way our brains have been formulated. So let's go back to activity one. So I gave you a bit of a chance. Let's take a look. Nirvana, Nevermind 1213, big album. Avril Lavigne, also big one. I'm noticing a theme of 12 years old. So it proves my point. So you're going to be surprised at this one. So let's go back to the music question. Researchers found, and look at the key ages, that between 12 and 25 are your peak musical experiences. The music, culture, and the fashion that you consume between these times will be locked in, and this will be what you follow for the rest of your life. So this explains why some of you are still wearing clothes and listening to music which are 20 years out of style, including me. My nephew is very big into grime and trap, and it just sounds like, when I listen to drill, no, sorry, it's not even trap, is it drill? He's very into that now, and it just sounds like a lot of people shouting and plates falling on the floor. It just sounds like it's just lots of sounds. I don't know. Put it in the comments if you like drill music. It's not really my thing. I'm stuck in the 90s/noughties era of hip hop and R&B, which I believe is the greatest era for hip hop and R&B. I come up when there was Tupac and Biggie, and that's what I still listen to. I mean, there's some good bands now, but if you ask me what's my favorite music, it would be that. So you guys kind of fell into that. Between 12 and 25 are your peak musical experiences. So there you go. You've learned something today, musicians. All right. So this also explains why we have generational conflicts. So because of our brain's biology, as we age, we're literally not on the same wavelengths of thought as the previous or later generation. This is why you cannot understand your nan or your uncle That annoying one at Christmas. You know what I'm talking about. We all have that annoying older relative or younger relative. This is why. It's biology now. So this causes friction. So as newer generations emerge, their different views tend to challenge the generation's status quo before them. So which gives rise to misunderstandings, stereotypes, and insults. So I'm sure you've heard of these ones. Okay, boomer. Even I get called that. Okay, boomer. I'm like, hey, I'm still young, man. 21 forever. Millennials are entitled or lazy. Gen Xers are psychos. Forgive me, if anybody's a Gen Xer here, you're not psycho, you're a nice person. But you get the idea. So, you get the point. But as author and strategist Robert Greene, in his book, The Laws of Human Nature states, knowing the characteristics of each generation allows you to break free from their constraints. So what I want you to do is to gain something what Greene calls generational awareness, to be able to put yourself in the shoes of somebody older or put yourselves in the shoes of somebody younger, and that will give you, especially in our very turbulent times, an edge, an understanding, which will make you more effective as a person and more effective as a leader, because you are a leader. So hopefully we're going to be able to tap into the Generation Z students. So let's take a closer look at the generations. Now, there's a very, very interesting theory or model, which is called the Strauss-Howe generational theory. And this was established by the authors and historians William Strauss and Neil Howe in their 1991 book, Generations, which they continue to expand upon. Now, their initial studies were on American history, but they did the same research on other civilizations and saw similar patterns. So they started to see a pattern when they were looking at American history. And what is really interesting about this book is, I don't know if you remember a guy called Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was the political strategist for Trump during the early days of Trump's political campaign and then his first year of presidency. And he was very, very heavily influenced by this book because of what I'm going to tell you now. Now, it doesn't mean that obviously he was a bit sketchy, Mr. Bannon. It doesn't mean that the book is evil, but there's a real precedence to this model. It's one of the best known ones. Okay, so what is it? So according to their theory, human history tends to repeat itself over a period of 80 to 100 years called a seculum, all right, which is a period. Now, a seculum, think of it like a clock, goes through 4 distinct phases called turnings, and each new generation that emerges has its own political, economic, and cultural ideas that goes against the generation before. Now, each new generation that comes has a persona which typifies the behaviors and norms of the group. So according to their theory, there are 4 distinct phases, which is the high turning, awakening turning, unraveling turning, and crisis turning. All right, and I'm going to map it to our recent history so that you can understand it. So let's go through it. So the high turning is the first point. This is the 12 o'clock. Now, this is the first period after a great crisis or upheaval. The belief in institutions are strong and collectivism is promoted, society sticking together, doing things for the greater good. Conformity is at its peak and individualism is frowned upon, stifling the more creative individuals in this generation. This generation is known for their caution, their trust for institutions, and belief in team working. On our recent history, this would be the baby boomer generation. So this is between 1948 to 1963, which saw mass economic expansion, trade, and many in the Western Hemisphere radically improve their working standards. In fact, America really, it was after World War II when they became known as a superpower. They were up and coming, but World War II really established American dominance. So it was all about conformity. And this was where the expansion of the middle class happened. And it's similar to many countries in the Western Hemisphere. All right. So this was the type of things and new technologies and so on and so forth. Now, the turning that comes after that at 3 o'clock, if I know my time, 3 o'clock, is what is known as the awakening turning. Now, people tire of building institutions and look to work on their personal authenticity. This is also an age of spiritual awakenings with activists and leaders calling for society to be renewed. Questions start being asked of the society that they live in, and the young feel that conforming to the high turning ideals is cultural poverty. All right, they're still idealistic, but they want a different system to reform the current one. So in recent history, we're talking about, this was encapsulated in the free love movement, also known as the hippie movement, consciousness revolution, and civil rights movement, roughly from the mid-60s to the early 80s. So I'm sure you've seen that. It was all much more colorful. It was more of an emphasis on individualism. In fact, when we look at the leaders of this time, so that's Billy Graham, he's an American preacher, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, many in fact where they looked at a study in America, and the biggest preachers and religious leaders were born during this time. It was very much about the individual looking deeper in themselves and questioning authority, but they were still pretty much idealistic. Now, looking at, yes, no, my times, looking at now 6 o'clock, the Unravelling Turning, which is the third one, the questions that were raised in the Awakening Turning do not go away, and the initial idealism starts to turn into cynicism, especially when change is not delivered. Okay? Institutions look weak, corrupt, vulnerable, and openly questioned. Individualism and creativity are praised, and collective action is seen as naive. Society starts to fragment into distinct groups, which makes collective action more difficult. Confidence in the future darkens, and inequality seems starker. And this is typified by the generation known as Generation X. So this was in the late 70s to late 90s, with its zenith being around Reaganism and Thatcherism. Now, this era, the yuppie era, is probably encapsulated by this character. Now, let's see if you guys know this. He won an Oscar. This was played by Michael Douglas, and he came up with a phrase called "greed is good." Good. In the comments, let's see if you know. Who is this fictional character here? And what film did he come from? Anybody? I'm showing my age again, perhaps. But I think you guys are similar profile to me. Anybody? Let's take a look. Wall Street, absolutely. No idea. Gordon Gekko, absolutely. He was a corporate raider. Well done, guys. He was a corporate raider. And this was the time where corporate raiding is basically hostile takeovers of companies. And after Reaganomics and the free market, I won't bore you with that type of stuff. It was like a dog-eat-dog world there. And he was known for getting companies and stripping them down. If you know Pretty Woman, Richard Gere's character was a corporate raider as well. Slightly different. Obviously, you've got the likes of Steve Jobs. A lot of innovators and entrepreneurs come up in this time. If you look at films like Robocop, Alien, Terminator, which came out during this time, it was about mega corporations which used to exploit, mega corporations exploiting the weak and the vulnerable in society, and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. But the good thing was there was a lot of creativity, art, individualism was praised, and as we said, Reaganism and Margaret Thatcher, which leads us now. So some scholars believe that older millennials, which I say I'm a part of, were part of this generation. And the recent unraveling was worsened by the 9/11 attacks and the war on terror. I'm sure most of you, if you're my age, you'll remember that very distinctly. The world changed overnight. And that's when people really started to feel more fearful. And not only fearful of outside forces like terrorists or supposed terrorists, but also of their own governments and how we're being governed. Which leads us to now, the crisis turning, which is the fourth turning, according to their theory. Public trust in institutions are at an all-time low. The rise of populism and overthrowing the establishment takes root. Societies are polarized and discourse becomes more antagonistic. People can't even talk nicely. If you're on social media, my gosh, you say something, oh my gosh, people pounce on you. Anyway, that's another story. The processes that dealt with issues in the previous turnings are perceived as ineffectual and dated, especially when it comes to democracy, especially when it comes to dealing with leaders, following leaders. This is a time of innovation. Artists, entrepreneurs, and activists create artifacts that give glimpses of the future. People start saying, this is how our future can be. Society itself seems under threat, and the younger generation uses this crisis to galvanize real change. As the crisis rolls on, civic duty and collectivism, ironically, starts to re-spark, and there's more emphasis placed on personal responsibility for the good of society. So people are like, we need to come together, we need to sort stuff out. So of course, every single generation faces crises. Crises? That's right. But it's about how each generation responds to them that determines their characteristics. In the fourth turning, this generation proactively tries to establish a new status quo, leading them into direct conflict with all the other generations that want it to stay the same. Okay? So, yes, before I go into that. So what that means is, whereas before some people would begrudgingly go and follow the government, for example, this turning, in a crisis turning, this generation is like, forget the government, forget all the systems in place, we need to tear the whole thing down and we need to start afresh, okay? So of course, in our recent history, the Great Depression of 1929, the Global Depression, could be seen as the start of the great crisis of the 20th century. This prompted the rise of far-right extremism, 2 world wars, and a complete reordering of the world order as Nazi Germany was defeated. This generation became known as the Golden Generation, who were at the forefront of these vast political, economic, and social changes. All right, so activity 2, really quickly. I'm sure you don't want to remember what happened in 2020, but let's look at it to see if we're really in a crisis. So on the next slide, I have 11 images of history changing events. Well, some of them did change history, but some were just weird, okay? In the comment section, I want you to guess them and the month they happen. So let me get the comments up first, if I can find it. So in fact, I'll do that. So what's this image relating to? Does anybody know? Oh, I almost gave it away there. Anybody know? If you don't know, even just say, I have no idea. All right? Anybody? So let's just get the chat function. Iran, absolutely. This gentleman's name was Qasem Soleimani, and he was assassinated by the American government under the Trump administration in January 2021, which sparked, almost destabilized the whole of the Middle East. All right? That was a very, very serious incident because people were scared it was going to start World War III. And that was the start of 2020. Let's move on. Number 2, what's this, guys? Come on, you all should know it by now. You all should know it. I should be saying Brexit. And why was it? I love the exclamation mark from Holly. Brexit. Oh, sorry, Phoebe. Brexit. There you go. Why was 2020 I can't say that. It's a family show. All right. Why was 2020 significant? Can anybody remember about this? We had Brexit in 2016, but why was 2020 significant? Anybody remember? No? Yes, it was the official year we left the EU. So remember, we had a grace period, but then we were leaving the EU. And at that time, there was a lot of instability. Now it's a bit better, but before we didn't know what was going to happen when we left. Okay, so there was a lot of problems with that. Next one, what's this image pertaining to? This is like a horror show, isn't it? Don't worry, it gets better, guys. It gets better. What does this one pertain to, guys? Anybody? Australia, well done. This was Australia wildfires. This happened in February 2020. It's the worst wildfires in Australia's history, which I think they believe a quarter of all vegetation, animals and insects were burnt up in this fire. It was a huge fire, which really started to ring the bell about climate change. Next one. Oh, come on, guys. You know this one. This one, you know. Should we even bother? Yes. COVID. Although it's better now, we're still not out of it. This started, well, rumbling started in, I think, December 2019, but it really started to take root in March 2020. All right, so COVID, you're absolutely right. These next ones are going to be dead easy. Sorry, I'm running out of space here, guys. Let me just put it over here for a second. Running out of space. What's this guy? I know he's everybody's favorite. What's this image pertaining to? Anybody got a clue? Lockdown, absolutely. Bojo's first briefing, absolutely. Yes, this is when Bojo first came out and said we are going into lockdown. Lockdown 1. If I remember it. I can't believe I'm naming it like the Fast and Furious franchise. It's the worst franchise there. Sorry, I'm not going to depress you too much. I'm just trying to make a point here. So it's going to get better, I promise you. Let's quickly move on. This was Clap for Carers. This is what we all did. We're banging our pots and pans. This one, I'm sure everybody knows this one. What triggered this one? Somebody in the comments, I have one person. What triggered this one? George Floyd, absolutely. George Floyd's murder. This was in May 2020, triggered the biggest civil rights movement in the history of mankind. In America alone, I think it was June the 7th. So he died on May 25th. I could be wrong. It was either 29th or 25th, I forget. But June 7th, I remember there was simultaneous worldwide protests, 20 million in America alone, but there were protests as far as Australia, Singapore, Italy. It was something that the world has never seen before. I'm going to speed on because I don't want to depress you guys. Obviously, Chadwick Boseman's death. Donald Trump, which was one of the most contentious elections in US history, and obviously against Joe Biden. We had the Extinction Rebellion as well. And then, of course, we had Kanye West, who ran for president. Kanye, I'm sure we'll get some nice trainers. He got something like 500,000 votes or something. Well, I know the country's for the 300 million voters, but still, he got a lot of votes. But yeah, Kanye West ran for president, which was always going to be interesting. So let's get rid of that. Well done, guys. It gets better. So the Strauss generation theory is not perfect, but it helps us to understand the cultural shifts in our world. With our ever-deepening environmental crisis, polarized politics, the COVID-19 pandemic, tense race relations, and our public institutions' feeble responses to these issues mean we teach a crisis generation. All right? So our young people know this. They know that this is a bit messed up. All right? So they are aware of this. So we have got to, as the adults in the room, try and guide them through this time. So I know what you're thinking, some of you right now. You're thinking, look, this is really interesting history lesson, but how is this going to help me teach my music production class? Well, remember I told you that each generation has certain characteristics. Generation Z has come of age. As I said, the oldest ones are 25 now, and we have the data on them. All right, we've been studying them for a long time. Not me personally, but lots of organizations have been studying them for a while. So now the data's in. And I want to share with you the current research about Generation Z and give you my classroom strategies and tips, or workshop strategies and tips that you can use to keep them inspired and engaged in your classroom. So, Generation Z's profile, what are they about, these young people? So, number one of the things that came out of the research is Generation Z are entrepreneurial. This generation is truly unique, and I'm not kidding. So, they carry something in there with them, and we all do every day, that St. Isaac Newton, Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Albert Einstein could only dream of. Can anybody guess what we carry every day? Which currently takes over our lives. In fact, I'm still looking at it right now. Anybody in the comments? What do we carry every day which is revolutionary? Let's take a look. Thank you guys. You're really into... Yes, absolutely. This thing here, the smartphone. I can't believe, right? Little aside. I went into a phone shop when I had to upgrade. I had an iPhone 6 for about 5 years. I went into the phone shop, right? And I said, I want, the latest gizmo. And he told me, at the time it was iPhone 13. I don't know if 14's been released. You know what he told me? It's going to cost me £1,600. I bought my first car for 500 quid. I said, what does this phone do? What does it do? Because you can look at it, it opens up. I said, nah, mate, not £1,600. It's crazy. That's why, I feel like I wanted to get a trap phone, but people might think I'm a drug dealer. But anyway, that's another story. These things are bloody expensive. Anyway, so the phone in your the phone in your pocket has more processing power than computers that put man on the moon, right? So Generation Z are digital natives. This is the first ever human generation to never know what life was like before the internet. Okay? With the internet, in fact, I'll go into it again. So things like getting information. So if somebody asked me, if Mish or Phoebe said, Karl, could you tell me who was the 5th president of France? I could literally go to my phone and within about 6 seconds go on Wikipedia and it would give me the information. In my generation, and I suppose your generation, what did we have to do? We had to go to something called a library. And that would take us a day to do that. We go to the library, go to the reference section, we photocopy things, then we take it back home. That took us hours to do. Kids are doing it almost instantaneously. The internet is it's an absolute revolution. And we should never take that for granted, all right? Because now it allows us to do things that our people even 20 years ago would not dream of. Remember the dial-up internet as well, AOL? Put it in the comments if you had AOL, but the dial-up internet. Was it only me? You know those ones where your mum couldn't make a phone call? Yeah. Yes, my mum was, can you come off the phone? What are you doing? I was like, Mum, I'm downloading something. It took like 3 hours to download one song. Those are the good old days. Broadband changed all that. Thank you very much, guys. I'm not alone. So with the internet democratizing ownership, fame, and leadership, our students no longer feel they need to go through the cultural and societal gatekeepers to get their projects and ideas out there. They have a powerful do-it-yourself attitude. Okay, guys? So creativity, side hustles, and entrepreneurship is the new rock and roll. We, again, take that for granted. And again, as musicians and music teachers, we should know more than anybody else in society. If we think about people like Justin Bieber, Krypton Conan, their careers came about through the internet. Justin Bieber was putting tunes on YouTube when it was just starting, and then he was scouted by someone called Scooter Braun, and the rest, as they say, is history. Krypton Conan released a bootleg, they're rappers by the way, of Jay-Z's Otis, which got, I think at one point, more views than the Kanye, sorry, it was Jay-Z, it was Watch the Throne, Kanye and Jay-Z, Otis, and they got more views than that, and that's what started their career. So now people understand, Stormzy, if I understand correctly, is still independent or semi-independent because they can do things on their own. So next activity, we're doing really well. I want you to name these influencers. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to present you some famous digital influencers. Right, this is a new term. And I want you to name them and what they're famous for and guess their financial net worth. Okay? So you don't have to write an essay. It could be something like this. Karl Pupé, TikTok, £1 billion net worth. I wish. Okay? If you've got $1 billion, you can give it to me. All right? So let me get the chat function up again. So there you go. Thank you very much. So let's get it up here. So first one. Who is this individual, guys? LimeWire. Well done, Tiffany. Well, LimeWire. Oh my gosh. You know how many viruses I've got, Tiffany, off LimeWire? I stopped using it. It was just infecting my machine. It was awful. There you go. My mum was not very happy. So anybody recognize this gentleman here? Anyone? I'll give you a second. If you don't know, just say, nope, I don't know who this guy is. KSI. No. It's good to know. His name is KSI. So well done, Phoebe. You're down with the kids, clearly. So KSI. So this guy, he's a YouTuber. Absolutely. That's what he's known for. So this guy, sorry, I'm going to cover your face, KSI, was known, he started about 10 years ago for making YouTube videos about him playing FIFA computer games. But as his popularity grew, he expanded into music and boxing. Okay, so he has now 24 million subscribers on YouTube, just literally playing computer games and making little things. And he's worth roughly about 16 million pounds. In fact, he had a fight with another person, which I won't name, who it was the biggest amateur fight in history in terms of pay-per-views, just two YouTubers fighting each other. So he used and leveraged YouTube to create his fortune. All right, so let's get rid of him. Who is this individual, guys? Anybody know? Who is this individual? Any answers? Tiffany, you're on fire today. Yes, of course, of course. I think I should give you a lot of rewards. It's Maya Jama, absolutely. She is a TV personality, but what's interesting with her, she's very clever. Very, very clever woman. Yeah, so she's known for television presenting, but she's also very, very savvy as an internet entrepreneur. And she leverages her social media presence, or she leveraged her social media presence to launch her skincare business called Amij & Co. Right? Now, she has 2.4 million followers on Instagram, and she used that to her advantage to sell her product. And now she's got a net worth of roughly 1.5 million pounds. So she did that of her own accord. Obviously, she had her presenting gigs, but she used her social media platform to help her distribute her own products, which is really clever. And of course, someone like Rihanna is also very, very clever as well, because she launched her Fenty brand and used social media very, very well. Last one, guys, for the road. Who's this gentleman here? Very controversial gentleman. Anybody know? Who's this gentleman? Tiffany, you're going to get a reward. You are absolutely... Put it in the comments, Tiffany. You're down with the kids, aren't you? You're down with the kids. You're down with the kids. So well done, Tiffany. Absolutely. Do you know what he's famous for? Something like that. I like it. What is Logan Paul famous for? Anybody? Yes. Yes. Spot on. Right. So let's go into Logan Paul real quick. Let me just put it down here. Logan Paul, he's known for initially making Vine comedy spoofs, which he then took to YouTube. So Vine was kind of like TikTok. Basically, Vine and TikTok are the same to me. So it's 60 seconds of a video and you make spoofs. And he did that and he got something like 3 million followers on Vine. And he realized with YouTube, he could make more money and leverage that. So now he transitioned, very similar to KSI, he transitioned into podcasting and boxing. In fact, one of his podcasts, the Logan Paul podcast, is one of the biggest in the world. He's got 23.2 million YouTube subscribers and 21.3 million Instagram subscribers, and his net worth is roughly about 19 million. In fact, he had a fight with KSI. Those two had a boxing match about 3 years ago, and that was the biggest amateur boxing match in history. All right, it had what's his face? Eddie, is it Eddie Hearn? Eddie Hearn, who represents Anthony Joshua, doing it. I don't know how many millions they made, but it was huge. Okay, but these guys are the new entrepreneurs. They're very, very, very savvy in what they do. So thank you guys for participating. So really quick for time. In a KPMG study about millennial and Gen Z work patterns, so this is a big research center, researchers found that 75% of Gen Zers considered joining the gig economy, and flexible working is normalized in this generation. So the 9 to 5, 40-40 plan, 40 years, 40 hours a week for 40 years and you get a pension is kind of not au fait with this generation. On average, Generation Z workers stayed in a job for about 3 years and felt very comfortable looking for new challenges. Reasons cited for the ease of movement were online networking opportunities, peer-to-peer comparisons by companies like Glassdoor, and low barriers to entry to create their own streams of income, i.e. online marketplaces like Amazon and eBay and cheap website facilities. I don't know if you're like me, if you've gone on YouTube, there's always these guys saying, I got a Lamborghini, man, in my backyard. Man, I'm a millionaire through Amazon drop shipping and all these type of things. You can sell cheap t-shirts on Amazon. This is what they're talking about. Because now the means of production, this is we're talking sociology. Basically, if you wanted to do something like make t-shirts, you needed to go and buy a big factory, hire workers and do all that type of stuff. You don't. Now with the internet, you can send an order through to somewhere like China or Malaysia or Singapore, and it can get it all done for you. So the costs are really, really cheap. Okay, so how does this show up in your classroom? How does it show up in your workshops? Your students are ambitious and may challenge your authority because they may see the old way of doing things as obsolete. This may so there's also strong indications that this current generation has become disillusioned with the current education system. I don't know. Put it in the comments if you've ever had a young person, whether in whatever space you work in, whether it's your workshop or whether it's I don't know a classroom or I don't know if you're mentoring them, who said I don't see the point of school. Just click yes or just put one or something in there. If you've ever heard young people say, "What is the point of all of this? I don't understand why I'm doing this." Yep, yep, yep. It's all coming in. It's coming in. It's coming in. This is the reason why. All right? Him. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But what you must do if you're mentoring, or what you must do when you're talking to them, is you must channel their aspirations. Trying to tamp them down is counterproductive. You need to use a technique called bridging, which is to connect what they do with what you want to teach. What do I mean by that? Let's go into that. So recommendations for bridging. So when I talk about that, coming at them and saying you need to learn about Henry VIII and his wives might be counterproductive. Or coming at them and saying you need to learn, I don't know, algebra, right? They might say, so what? I can do all that stuff. You need to figure out what they want and connect it with what you want. So how you do that is basically you need to design lessons that will encourage independent learning and give them some scope where possible in what they want to learn. So when I was supply teaching in a school and I was covering English, I remember talking to a lot of this was an inner city school, and they're saying, man, this is boring, metaphors and similes. And I said, oh, you're a rapper, right? Yeah, I'm a rapper. And I go, you know what? All your best rappers use metaphors, similes, all these language devices, alliteration, personification all the time. So wouldn't it be better for you to learn that in school? And he turned it around because he could see that, what I'm doing will help me in what I want to do. So this is what you need to do. So think about what do they tap into what they want. Offer projects which spark their interest and set questions that they'll be motivated to answer. You will now have taken that rebellious energy and channeled it into classroom learning. It's about intrinsic motivation. Find out what they want to do and help them achieve that through whatever you're teaching, whether it's music, whether it's psychology. I don't know what you guys are doing, okay? But you've got to become very student-centered. And if I did another talk, I'll explain how to do that. But just always think, what's in it for them? How can I connect it together, okay? So, number 2. Ooh, time is running. Generation Z is pessimistic about authority. So let's look at some stats. According to Deloitte, when they interviewed older Gen Zers, a mere 12% believed that the political and economic situation would change for the better over 12 months. Now, for older Gen Zers, many of their defining moments when they were coming up through school were in the wake of the Great Recession. So I don't know if we all remember that credit crunch, the austerity measures in this country, the fallout of the Brexit vote, and the rancorous political split that it caused, where people, in fact, I think Joe Cox got killed for our views in regards to Brexit. Okay, so these guys, our young people, are watching us and they've seen all these things happen, the growing inequality as well. So in these turbulent times, for many of our students, it's very difficult for them to see positive outcomes, especially when it comes to trusting authority figures. So although they may be more uncertain about their future, they're more entrepreneurial and willing to broaden their horizons and less frivolous than generations before them. Especially if you look at things like housing, they understand that, boy, if I earn an average wage, I'm not going to be able to afford a house in London. So they know all this type of stuff. So in a survey of 13 to 39-year-olds, the youth marketing website YPulse, they said 72% believed in hashtag activism that had the power to change the world, especially in the light of Black Lives Matter. So you'll see a lot more young people engaged in social media. They believe that their voice matters. All right, and they're going to do things like that, and they will question authority. So how does this show up in your space? So social media is a genie that we let out of the bottle. Right now, a young person or even you can go onto Twitter right now and you could say, Boris Johnson, you and your mum can beep 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 suck your beep 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 beep. That's revolutionary. You can abuse people that are in power. If this was 100 years ago, if this is in Winston Churchill's time, and you started shouting abuse to him, you're going to get a good throttling. If we went back 300 years ago, you insult the king or the queen, you get locked up in the Tower of London. So the barrier between those who are governed, right, those who are governors, those who oversee us, and the people who are overseen has become thinner and thinner and thinner. So if a young person can go and tell Boris Johnson and his mum to, you know what more for you? Generation Z, through social activism, are used to having their voices heard. They've used it to magnificent effects. Extinction Rebellion, Black Lives Matter, even Arab Spring, right? And you look at somebody like Greta Thunberg, I'm sure you're all familiar with her. She used social media and it gave her the profile she's got to organize all these activist rallies about the environment, right? So the last activity for today, I've got 2 questions. I want you to put this in the comments. I want you to answer. On average, How many social media accounts does the average adult use, and how many hours a day do they spend on them? So how many accounts? So if you think about Twitter, LinkedIn, how many roughly do you think the average adult in the UK has, and how many hours a day do you think we spend on them? Let's see in the comments. 3 accounts, 5 hours a day. Good guesses. 6 accounts, 4 hours a day. 4 accounts, 5 hours a day. You guys on fire. 3 accounts, 4 hours a day. That's a good one. You're there or thereabouts. You're there or thereabouts. All right. So the average person has 5 social, and this is according to Udacity, which is a technology company, have 5 social media channels or accounts, and the average time a person spends on them is 1 hour and 40 minutes a day on them. Well, it could be, split between them, basically. That's how much time we are spending on social media, okay? Social media has really changed the way that we do things. So, how many social media, now this is, you don't have to answer this, don't expose yourself, but it's not a personal question anyway. How many social media channels do you use regularly? What's your favorite? Roughly, guys. Oh, sorry, let's go back to that question. How many are you guys using? Be honest now. So I bet somebody's going to come out with 1. Be honest. I know you've got, okay, I'll be honest. I've got, let me count. I've got about 7. Now I've got 8 actually. I've got 8, and I am quite excessive on mine. I have to cut that down. 3. Tiffany, you're lying. I've seen you on more than 3. No, I'm joking, Tiffany. I'm playing with you. Not enough apparently. 2 for work. Yeah. 4. All right. I've got 8. I'm really bad, and I do spend about a good chunk of time on them. All right. So again, and what's your favorite actually, guys? What's your favorite? Be honest. What is your favorite channel? What's the one you find yourself using the most? Mine is Twitter. What's your Facebook? It used to be Facebook until my mum went on it. When my mum went on it, it just ruined it for me because my mum was commenting on all my pictures and comments. I was like, that's too much, mum. Facebook. Used to be Insta. Facebook. All right, fair enough. No Twitters? Is there nobody on Twitter? Facebook. All right, fair enough. FB wins. Mine is Twitter. My mum's not on there. All right. So we are in a social media world. Social media has democratized communication and made the line separating those in power and those who are governed thinner and thinner. I've already said that. Okay? So this is not going away. So what I'm saying to you is your positional authority is not enough. You must move away from being a teacher to being a coach or being a facilitator. The do what I say, and that's an order approach, simply doesn't work anymore. If any of you work in inner city London schools, if you try and shout at some of these kids, oh, it's going to be interesting. If you say, sit down and be quiet, it's not gonna end. What, bruv? Who are you talking to? It's not gonna end very nicely for you. These kids are used to being listened to, and talking to them like that's not gonna work. So there's 2 elements that a crisis generation educator needs in a classroom, and they are authority and warmth. And really quickly, because time is running out, I've got a whole blog. So on my website, I talk extensively about this, but I'm just gonna cue you in here. So when we're talking about authority, we're talking about your position, which is your role. So it could be a child psychologist, it could be a youth worker, it could be a workshop facilitator. That is your position. But it's also about your influence, who you are, what your character is about. Because people need to buy into you as a person. So if you come in the room and you're like, you're going to do what I say, and if you don't do what I say, I'm going to do that. Your position will keep you there, but your kids are not going to follow you. Your young people are not going to follow you. They're going to just say, you know what, bore off. They're going to start not turning up. So you need to marry those 2 together. All right? Now, that's one side of it. That's authority. The other side is what we call warmth. So when we talk about warmth, what I'm talking about is your emotional intelligence, which is understanding our own emotions and responding correctly, and empathy, understanding a student's needs and knowing how to serve them. So on one hand, emotional intelligence is being able to read the room. So obviously, if a child throws a chair at you, you go and spark them, you're going to lose your job and probably get arrested. So you need to be in control of yourself and think to yourself, why did that child or young person throw that chair or swear at me? That's emotional intelligence. Forgive me. There you go. That's emotional intelligence. Empathy is about being able to step into your young person's shoes, okay, and look at them and say, oh, okay, this is what it's about, okay? How can I kind of serve them, all right? And you need to marry those 2 together. So guys, what I'm going to do is that I've wrote 2 blogs about this, which talks all about it. So I've already agreed with the organizers. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint. And also, I've got a free blog about teaching Generation Z, which you can download from my website, and I encourage you to go and get it. So don't worry, you'll get these resources. So remember, your needs equals behavior. If you don't understand your learners' needs, and then you can't influence their behavior, that is the absolute key. Last thing, and I'm going to speed through this one. Generation Z is motivated by values as well as material goods. So in the last 5 years, counseling a celebrity, R. Kelly, has become a very prevalent activity on social media. Celebrities and public figures who have been caught in wrongdoing, either past or present, get dragged, publicly shamed, ridiculed, and harassed online. All right. This is not a new practice. If you go in medieval times, people were throwing rotten eggs and tomatoes and all these types of thing there, right? And there were even public executions. But with social media, this has become amplified. So this generation is very much into seeking justice and righting the wrongs of the past, which is also a feature of the crisis generation. So basically, I'm just going to speed through this. What has happened is, looking at everything, if we look at this generation, basically what's happened is this generation has grown up looking at the inequalities, looking at the harder economic through their parents or people that they know, and they become more inclined to become less materialistic. It's not about owning stuff, okay? Now, as I said, because of austerity, the Great Recession, inequalities, this generation have become a lot more sensitive to the injustices of the world, and they're more willing to act on it. Okay. So last thing, and then we go to questions. Bringing all of this together, what does this all mean practically? I don't know, guys. Put it in the comments if you've heard of this place called the Pimlico Academy. Think about last Easter. Did anybody hear about that on the news? The Pimlico Academy? Anybody? No. All right. Let's take a look. Yeah. Okay. Wicked. You did a workshop there, Sinead. Sorry, forgive me if I said your name wrong. Wow. You did a workshop there. You must have seen it all kick off. Forgive me if I said your name wrong. So basically what happened here, and this happened last Easter, was basically the head teacher tried to bring in a raft of... Anyway, let me explain it this way. So these are the images from there. The head teacher, this was on the 31st of March, 100 students basically staged a protest outside the Pimlico Academy over allegations of racism amidst change to the curriculum, its uniform policy, and the placement of the Union Jack outside of the building. So if I remember rightly, they were talking about banning particular hairstyles which were blocking the view of other people, and it was seen as racism. It's targeting specific groups. Now, the students and parents and some of the staff participated in these protests in response to these policies which they felt negatively targeted minorities. The head teacher, his name was Daniel Smith, after a meeting with some of the pupils, agreed to roll back some of these changes and would continue to review the school policies in light of the situation. Now, what this taught us about this current generation, it was absolutely brilliant what they did. You know, as I said, student protests are nothing new, but the way they organized it was students were able to use the technology on their smartphones to galvanize not only their fellow student body, but similar activist networks around the world to enhance their voice. They did not rely on gatekeepers or the media broadcasters. They were able, through their creativity and entrepreneurial flair, to dictate the narrative in a very impactful way online. In fact, I was watching BBC Morning News. No, was it the one? What was the one with Piers Morgan? I'm sure it was Piers Morgan. And they had an expert, a social media expert, and he said the way that these guys run their campaign against this school was worthy of merit. It's almost as good as a company like Adidas or, you know, Nike would do in terms of this, the way they handled their social media. It was brilliant. The school would release a statement, they'll release a counter statement, they were making films, and remember, they were doing this off their phones, all right? So they were making GIFs, they were making memes, and also they were using hashtags like Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion to amplify their voice. This was around the world. It was crazy, right? And they did it at very, very minuscule cost. And remember, they're school kids. They really put their head teacher under a lot of pressure, okay? So this is not going away. This is here to stay. We can't put our heads in the ground. So what can we do? The last thing I want to leave you with is that with our young people, post-COVID-19, post-George Floyd, our young people are more conscientious than ever about the companies and institutions that they interact with and how it affects their world. Students will be very picky, our young people are very picky about the companies and institutions that they follow, not only for their products and services, but their stances on the hot topics of the day. We're not only talking about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about intersectionality, when we're talking about the LGBTQIA plus community. I'm sure you've heard what's going on with Netflix and the whole Dave Chappelle thing as well. So, and rightly so, they're highlighting these things and saying, we're not going to consume your content or buy your products if you don't get behind certain things. So as educators, we must be willing to have those difficult conversations with our students. We can't leave it at the door. Can't say we're just going to focus on music. We must learn to facilitate wherever possible the ability for them to explore their ideas and come up with their own solutions. And this does not mean we give them a blank check, carte blanche to do whatever they want. If they bring in things which are racist or bring in things which are I don't know, anti-Semitic or things which are homophobic into your space, you as the teacher have to guide them and say, no, this is not right. But have that robust dialogue, allow them to express their ideas and come up with their own solutions. All right. And respect the lived in experience of other people. And they're really good young people at doing this. And Generation Z, they know they're a crisis generation, but they're trying to make things better. The majority of them. Help them to do that. Help them to guide them, lead them, and that's what they need. So they do it in positive ways. Okay. So you're no longer giving them facts and figures, but you're going to guide them. I've kind of said this, and they are the future. We have royally cocked up our planet, but I am very, very positive and optimistic because I believe these guys do have the answers that we need. Okay, and we must figure out what makes them tick. So hopefully I got through that, and I left enough time. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. But we're going to go to questions. But really quickly, if you want to get in contact with me, I'm at contact@actionheroteacher.com. As I said, I've got my free ebook on there as well, Teaching Generation Z, which I'll go deeper into what I've spoken about today. Catch me on Twitter at ActionHeroTeach. Instagram, I'm not really big on, to be honest. I don't like it. Too many posing, and I can't really pout as well. I'm not really that guy. So please follow up with me. So thank you for listening, and I'll stop sharing my screen. There you go. Hope you enjoyed that. All right. Are there any questions? Anybody? Oh, I can talk. It's all right. I've got my drink here. It's not whiskey. There you go. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. People want to have said something.
Thank you so much, Karl. That's great.
No problem. Got through it. Is there any questions? Anything? Any comments?
Can I make a comment?
Go for it, please.
It's really useful. Really
Hello,
useful.
Tiffany.
Hi.
Finally, we get to we know each other socially.
Yeah.
Finally, we've been talking to. It's weird in a weird way, in a good way. It's good.
Yeah, it shows you the power of the internet, doesn't it?
There you go. What we're discussing.
Yeah.
Pleasure to finally meet you. Sorry, I interrupted it. Pleasure.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. It's just changed a bit of my perspective, I think, thinking about my own children and seeing them on the phone all the time and them talking about being YouTubers and me kind of rubbishing that as a career. Looking at, like, you know, how much these people are earning and how well they're doing. It's just, I mean, I knew all of that, but just the way that you've, you know, presented that and given that model as well, it's really useful for practice.
Especially if they become the new KSI, Tiffany. Honestly, 19 mil, you're not going to say no to that, are you?
No, I'll be taking that money.
But it is a viable career. I mean, people that I know people that are on Instagram and social media. Of course, those that are more extreme ends, high ends, but there are people that are making a living, full-time living, being Instagram models, and it's less than you think. If you can get 10,000 people, that's when brands will start approaching you and so on and so forth. And again, I'm not familiar. You guys probably know better than me. Love Island. I can't get my head around it. Maybe I'm stupid, but I really can't. No, I love her. No, you don't, mate. She's my partner. I don't know what's going on. Every time I watch it, leave it, John. I'm like, I don't know what's going on there. But from my understanding, some of those guys were selected because they had high profiles on Insta and stuff like that. And then one of them has gone on to be the face of Boohoo, not Boohoo.
Yeah, Molly May.
That's the one, and she's signed a lucrative contract. It was like millions and millions of pounds. So off the back of just starting an Instagram, if you're savvy enough and you know how to kind of do it, it can be a viable career. That's what I'm saying. You might not make millions, but I know there's a boy I teach. He's got something like 30,000 people on his YouTube, and he's just doing rubbish, opening toys, and he's got 30,000 and he's getting money. It's true. So when your parents say don't play a computer game,
my kids watch those kids opening toys and they're making so much money and their parents are involved as well. And I'm thinking, I'm doing a doctorate. Why am I doing that? Because I'm never going to earn that money. Because
you're a good parent. No, I'm joking. No, honestly, it's you're trying to do the right thing. I do look at my mum and say, Mum, you forced me to take a degree. There are guys opening toys, making millions. It's not fair. It's like Squid Game.
Eventually they run out of stuff to open though, and then you've got to keep thinking of your content creation, man. It's hard. It's harder than you think.
It's hard. It's a hard job, but trying to teach 30 inner city kids is hard.
Yeah, totally.
Nah, man, I'm not doing it. Nah, man. Yeah, dealing with that.
I'm not comparing that to open a present.
So absolutely. So I think again, I'm presuming a lot of you guys work in the music industry. We've been at the forefront.